I've been taught that all the time. The people you hang out with. John Maxwell, a great leadership guru, says this, and I love his teachings. He said that the people closest to you determine your level of success. Anybody want to agree with that statement? My wife taught my kids this statement. Her mother always said it to her. Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. How many said amen already? I've got these and these and these. They didn't understand it either. Essentially, that means tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. How many agree with that one? I'm getting amens this morning. Now, for all the Southerners, I've got one for you. If you lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas. Now we found our niche right there. Yeah, I got that one. My grandma said that. All of those statements make sense to me. I've tried to tell my kids that over and over and over again. Surround yourself with good people. Get the best people on your team. Watch your friends. Watch your associates. And then Jesus totally upends this by picking a bad guy to be on his team. Now, Jesus took the selection of the disciples very seriously. One of his greatest works that he did on earth was to pick out 12 men and spend most of his earthly ministry with them. When we think of Jesus' ministry, we think of a bunch of miracles. We think of healing sick people and feeding people and just preaching and doing all this time. But one of the things that we tend to overlook are those long passages of those words in red in the New Testament. And essentially that was Jesus sitting down most of the time with his disciples, pouring his life, his wisdom, and pouring his power into them. So one of the biggest things he did in his earthly ministry was spend time with these 12 men, just pouring his life into them. And he took the selection of these guys so seriously that the night before he chose the 12 disciples, he stayed up all night praying. And I believe he was praying, asking God to guide him in the selection of the 12 that he would pour his life into. So, did he miss it on Judas? Did Judas slip under the radar somehow and get on his team? I mean, Judas was a bad guy. Understand this. And I want to say, Jesus, you should have seen this coming. You ever try to help Jesus out a little bit? Anybody here other than me? I've tried to become Jesus' counselor. He doesn't accept my counsel. I've tried to give him advice. He doesn't listen to my advice. Tried to help him out even with his church. I've told Jesus how to build his church before. He doesn't listen to me. Because he's God and I'm not. See, Judas was a bad guy. I want to tell you a few things about Judas. First of all, Judas was a thief. He was a thief. He's the kind of guy you don't want on your team. In John chapter 12, it said this, not that he cared for the poor, John 12:6. This is a story when the woman broke the box of perfume on Jesus' feet and anointed him, and Judas spoke up and said, well, she's wasted this. This could have been sold and this money given to the poor. And John wrote about it. John said, not that he cared for the poor, he was a thief. And since he was in charge of the disciples' money, he often stole some for himself. Wait, what? Did I just read that? Not only did Jesus put him on the team, he made him the treasurer. What was Jesus thinking? I mean, when you get a treasurer, we just hired someone to fill that, roll it up. We have one retiring and a precious lady coming on named Brenda. And I remember the first conversation I had when we were talking about who to hire in that position. And I said, the most important thing, more important than being able to do spreadsheets, more important than being able to count, more important than being able to work with money, the number one qualification for this job is a sterling character. And we found that person. We've all had that person, and we found another one. We trust implicitly. Why in the world would you take a guy who was a thief and put him over the money? He was regularly, understand this, while Jesus did his earthly ministry, he was regularly being stolen from. Think about that. Secondly, Judas was a betrayer. We know the story, but in Luke 22, when Jesus is praying with his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane, it It says, but even as Jesus said this, a crowd approached, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. That's one of the most startling verses in all the Bible if you were reading it for the first time. We've read it over and over again. Many people, even in the world that don't know the Christian faith, know about Judas because he's the most famous betrayer in the world. But you think about this as if you'd never heard it before. Jesus is in the garden praying, and the crowd came to arrest him, and they're led by one of the 12 disciples. That's a big deal. That's a twist in the story. And you know what Judas did? He didn't come up and say, there he is. That's Jesus. Go get him. He went up and kissed Jesus because he'd prearranged it with the guys and said, the one that you're after is the one I'm going to go up and give him a hug and a kiss. That's your guy. And it almost seems Jesus is shocked by this. I'm not sure Jesus actually got shocked, but he called it out. He said, Judas, wow, man. Have you ever been betrayed? Can I see your hands if you've been betrayed? It might be good for your neighbor to see that the person sitting next to them has also been betrayed. How many, honestly, have just been betrayed? You've had a time when you just said, wow, man, I trusted you. You were part of my circle. I invested in you. I gave to you. I helped you when you were down. I had conversations with you. I've poured into your life. And now you come and put a knife in my back. And you don't just stick a knife in me. You kiss me. Come on. That's how betrayal is. Somebody can't betray you unless they've already had your trust. Somebody really can't betray you unless you already love them to some degree. You've invested something in the relationship, and Judas turned his back on his dearest and nearest friend and put a knife in his back with a kiss. Judas was a thief. Judas was a betrayer. Judas was also what the Bible would call an idolater. You know what an idolater is? It's someone who has something else in God's rightful place in their life. It's someone who's taken God off the throne of their life, off the place of authority, and put something else there. Anything else becomes an idol. Judas had an idol, and it was money. He was willing to throw away his character to steal from the money bag. Then when he saw an opportunity, he went to the leadership and said, how much money will you give me if I turn him over to you? And he betrayed Jesus for the famous amount of 30 pieces of silver. He's an idolater. You know, I've known some people that proclaimed that Jesus was their Lord, but in reality, money was still their Lord. Let me ask you a question. Is Jesus really the Lord of your life? I want us to look this morning and not say, oh, look at bad Judas, and just see if there's any Judas in us. That maybe we follow Jesus, maybe we come to church, maybe we have all the external signs of being a follower of Christ, but yet something else has captured our heart. Whatever makes the decisions in your life is your God. I said, whatever makes the decisions in your life is your God. Had a guy come to me once, nice guy, had been to church for a while, really nice guy, brought his family, had little kids, and he came up to me and he said, hey, we're moving. I'm like, oh, well, congratulations, God's moving you to a new place and all this, and they were moving to another city. And I said, tell me the story. He said, well, I got this job offer for so much more money, and I'm moving. And I said, well, fantastic. Everybody wants a raise, right? I said, everybody wants a raise, right? Say, preacher, you're beating us about money, then you're asking us these questions. I'm so confused, I don't know what to do right now. I'm not messing with you here. Nothing wrong with having money, but when money has you, it can become your God. You want a raise? All right? Good. But the raise shouldn't direct your life. And we got to talking a little about his decision, and he's like, well, I'm really hoping and praying there's a good church in this town. Like, you didn't think about that yet? He even said, I hope the schools are good. What I began to unpack with him and see is that the one thing that made his decision was a raise. And he'd not considered anything else. I lost touch and I don't know what happened. And I pray they got plugged into a good place and all this. But I just give you that to illustrate. If money makes the decisions in your life, money is your God. And that's what happened to Judas. He followed after Jesus. But when Jesus wasn't the kind of Messiah he wanted, he betrayed him for his true God. Judas, a thief, a betrayer, an idolater. Yet Jesus still had him on the team. Why? I want to give you 2 reasons today why I believe, and I've studied and I've prayed, and I believe I've found 2 reasons why Jesus kept him on the team. Now, none of this caught Jesus by surprise. I've been playing around with it, joking around with it, but Jesus is never caught off guard. We say, it occurred to me. Nothing ever occurs to Jesus. Jesus never said, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Nope. God never learns anything. He's God. Aren't you glad He's in charge and you're not? It says this in John 6:44 very clearly. For Jesus knew from the beginning the ones that didn't believe, and He knew who would betray Him. Why? I want to give you 2 reasons. Number 1, Jesus chose Judas to fulfill the Scriptures. Jesus chose Judas to fulfill the Scriptures. The Old Testament had said that one was going to betray him from his own inner circle. And He chose him to fulfill the Scriptures and to fulfill the plan of God in his life. Centuries before Jesus, there lived a man named King David. David's this awesome man in the Old Testament, one of the best figures in the Old Testament, one of the biggest symbols or types of Christ in the Old Testament. David's the one who killed Goliath. David's this awesome story of a shepherd boy who rises to rule the nation. It's an incredible story. Yet David had some problems. When he became king, when you become king, there's some problems there because everybody wants to kill you. They want your power. And here's what happened to David. His own son turned against him. There's a story in the Old Testament. You really ought to read this sometime. It's the coolest story. Heartbreaking story. David had a son named Absalom. And Absalom was known for his luxurious hair. I mean, the guy had a head of hair that everybody in the room would be jealous of. I mean, they said that Absalom had to cut off, I should have studied this before I got up to preach it, but I think it was like 5 pounds of hair that he had to cut off. I mean, he could have made money selling it for wigs, you know what I mean? He had hair. Everybody thought, man, that guy's got a head of hair. And he was proud of it. He was tall, good looking, had a good personality, winsome. But he began to try to steal the kingdom from his own father. He would sit out by the gate. This is how betrayers are. He would sit out by the gate of the city, and when people would come by wanting to talk to David, he'd say, let me help you out. Dad's too busy. And the Bible said he stole the hearts of the people from his father David. And eventually it turned into an open rebellion and an open revolt. And you know what happened to David? This is David's moment of betrayal. David had a close advisor named Ahithophel. I got it on the second one. Ahithophel was one of his closest advisors. And Ahithophel turned and went into Absalom's camp as a spy, as an informer, and he actually began to work against David. And David was so shocked by it because this man had eaten at his table. Again, here's a picture of betrayal. In Hebrew culture, you didn't just eat with anybody. Today we'll eat with anybody, right? You ever go to one of these restaurants where they just sit you down and you sit with strangers? Anybody can come up and sit? I'm an introvert. I'm uncomfortable with that. We'll eat with anybody. In Hebrew culture, if you sat down to a table with someone and broke bread with them, you were saying you were in a covenant relationship with them. It was a very serious thing. And David had this guy sitting at his table. He's saying, here's someone in covenant relationship. After Ahithophel betrayed him, David wrote this in Psalm 41:9. He said this, even my best friend, the one I trusted completely, the one who shared my food, has turned against me.